Hey, how you feeling this fight week?
I'm feeling great. I'm ready for Friday, ready to weigh in tomorrow and get it all done.
It's been, a few months, right? So I'm curious, I guess, did you figure after that fight in April that this probably was the next one, that they'd probably do a rematch, or did you think for the first couple weeks after that, nah, I beat her?
Yeah, definitely the first few weeks, I thought I've rewatched the tape, my coaches rewatched the tape, everybody went through everything and there was no doubts in any of our minds. And so I thought all right, cool, there's not going to be a rematch. There's women that are already scheduled. And in my mind, you have to come off a win to be able to fight to be a contender for the belt. Right. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm watching these other women. They're going to be the next ones. And then as I start to hear more talk and more rumors going around, I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think this is going to be a rematch. And Bellator kind of led in that's exactly what it was going to be.
I mean, it obviously got announced 3 months or so ago, but how much before that did you sort of know, all right, this is what's going to happen, and then that gives you that extra time to kind of think about it?
I mean, of course, once I had the announcement and Bellator actually let me know, it was definitive. But before that, we were kind of preparing just on the idea that there were so many rumors going around and so much talk of it that it just seemed like it wasn't anything else that it could be. But at least it gave me some time just to focus on my own growth and not just this opponent.
So you've been thinking about one opponent for the better part of a year, right?
More than that, yeah.
So does that play to your advantage? Do you like that situation? Or would you rather have been thinking about somebody else?
Yeah, like I said, in my mind, for you to be eligible to be a contender, you have to come off of a win, not off of a loss. And particularly just with a different outcome. If it had been I gouged her and she was eligible for a rematch, yeah, that absolutely makes sense in my mind. I kicked her in the groin, it was a rematch. Those are circumstances where I understand, yeah, that warrants it. But not when you're not moving on the ground and I'm elbowing you 12 unanswered elbows. That doesn't really make sense in my mind. So I definitely thought that it was going to be a different woman. And in my mind, that's a lot more exciting to me as a new opponent. Somebody that's fresh, something's different styles, so I can also grow more. When you're fighting the same opponent, it's not really a lot of growth. It's kind of limited to what they do, what they don't do. When it's another opponent at a different style, it just excites me more because I get to show a different part of my game.
I presume both of you guys will have made some kind of adjustments in the last 8 months. Talk me through that process and how do you think about, all right, this is where she may make some changes based on what I did during the first fight, and then how do you kind of plan for that?
Yeah, you can definitely, you can only predict so much when it comes to MMA. Can't count how many fights where I'm like, okay, this person has 30 fights, and they've done the same thing almost every other fight. It's just a copy paste over and over. And then they come out, I'm like, that wasn't the same opponent. I don't know what happened. They're like, they've never changed anything in 30 fights until you. So I can, as much as I want to prepare for the idea that she's going to come out exactly the same and do things, but I also have to have in my mind that may be somebody completely different, somebody coming out emotional, somebody that's actually super aggressive. So I'm running through all the scenarios and inputting it, and really I'm just going out there to be my best representation of everything that I've worked on to evolve to get to this moment.
Thank you. Liz, your entire career, you come really close to winning the title. You've never been the world champion. You've always been the hunter. Now you're the hunted. Does it feel different coming in fight week like that?
Yes and no, because I've also been in positions where, especially when I was in the UFC, towards the end of my time there, where they were bringing in former world champions and other organizations, and I was going to be their stepping stone to make their mark going into the UFC. And so it was constantly somebody trying to gun for me and me having to take them out to stake my claim and stay where I was at.
The mental part of the game is so big, I'm sure you would say that. Did you ever have doubts that, you've been close, but you never got the title? Did that doubt ever creep in that maybe it wouldn't happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I've been doing this for almost 13 years and always felt like I was at the top and I was the best out there, and that something would happen, make a mistake, whatever it was, where I'd fall short of that and just wondering, is this ever actually going to happen? Or would this only happen as a small show that really isn't going to satisfy me and going to cement that for me? So it definitely, of course, was a doubt in my mind, but I also knew what I'm capable of, what my dreams were, and what I was aspiring to do.
You said that you were going to get more excited if it was a different opponent. Obviously, it's the rematch. I'm assuming excitement had to come in sometime, to get motivated to train. When did that?
If you want to say the excitement and motivated to train, I train 7 days a week when I'm in fight camp, but then when I'm not in fight camp, it's 6 days a week. So as far as excitement to train, I'm excited to learn and grow and evolve. There's so many possibilities to integrate things into the sport And I just love learning and growing. It's always a matter of like, what can I achieve this fight camp? What can I do this? It's not even about the opponent. It's always a matter of what can I do to grow and how much more can I change? So that motivation doesn't change based on the opponent. But there's certainly some opponents where it's like, well, I mean, if they're judokan, can I throw a judokan? Like, like, oh, okay, well, they're a black belt here, they're black belt this. Well, can I do that to them? It's always a matter of like besting what they're at, just at least pulling it off once. So of course I have that element in there as well.
So go back in time a little bit with me. So when they brought up the idea of Velasquez, you wanted other people, you wanted somebody like, who were you looking at? Who were you hoping for?
Yeah, I was looking at everybody that's in the top 5. If I'm going to be honest, one of the biggest opponents I was looking at was Watanabe. After her finish against Denise Kilholtz, I was super impressed. I felt like she had so much to offer in that fight, and I was preparing so much for it. And while, of course, I'm happy I had a quick stoppage and I was able to finish her, at the same time, I didn't really get a chance to like test everything with her. And I felt like I caught her and I took advantage of that. But one thing she showed against Denise was Denise caught her and she came right back and did really well. So I feel like she learned from that experience. She beat a really game opponent. And she is, as far as the ranking system goes, the next step for it. And I think a rematch with her would make a lot more sense. And it would give us both the chance to test ourselves more. And I think that would be really exciting, particularly going to Japan to do it.
Hi Liz, over here. I see that you have a Road Warrior Foundation shirt.
Yes.
What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, Road Warrior, it's a nonprofit organization, and they work particularly with injured veterans. And so they do adventure therapy. They take them and you get a chance to like go on a specialized Can-Am vehicles, which I don't know if you ever see them. They're like a 3-wheeled, almost kind of like a motorcycle, but they offer a lot more safety, a lot more comfort. They're a lot of fun, but they try and build the camaraderie of everybody unite together on a mission from going from point A to point B with different stops and adventures along the way. And the relationships you build through that, you can see them change everybody's life. So you have some injured veterans that have been blown up and because of their injuries haven't left their homes since the incident. And then they go on this adventure, they push themselves out there and it changes their whole lives and they're able to build connections with people and their family that they weren't doing before. So I'm fortunate to be involved in the organization and try and spread and let everybody know about that so they can take part as well.
Liz, I'm just curious. You talk about your military service all the time. If you had to choose sort of like a Sophie's Choice kind of deal, which would you say is more like, oh my God, I actually accomplished this? Getting through a basic training in the Marines, or being one of a select few women to fight for Invicta, Strikeforce, Bellator, and the UFC?
Ooh, see, that's a hard one. See, I feel like what the military represents, what it serves, is such a special thing. I know if you go to places like Virginia Beach, you go to, or Norfolk, where that's a military town, San Diego, it's a military town. It doesn't feel as special because everybody there is somehow related to military, but there's always something special with that. But also at the same time, having been at many times the first fight in all these organizations is also a huge one. So I don't know if I can choose that one. That one's a hard one.
Liz, so you were the first female fighter in UFC history to enter the cage back in 2013. So I feel like you're the perfect woman to ask this. What are your thoughts on the evolution of female MMA and what could it potentially improve upon?
I think female MMA has a lot of room for improvement, but it's also improved so much. When I started in the sport, women weren't headlining. They weren't names that were talked about in common in households. You didn't walk in, you couldn't just identify a female fighter on the street other than cauliflower. And even then, people weren't as familiar at that time. They assumed something different, right? There were gyms that were not inclusive to women, that even if they did have women that were allowed to train there was no anticipation of them pursuing a real fight career. Now you can walk into almost any gym and they'll have a female fighter. And if they have one, they cater to and make sure that they're getting just as much attention as the men. That's a huge change from what I went through. And now you see women where we headline, where a lot of times people are tuning in and want to see female fights more than they do male fights, where you can now go into people's household and like, hey, do you know this name? Of course I know who she is, right? That's a big change. But at the same time, you look at like Bellator, we don't have a 135 weight class. And that's something that you can see us opening up more. I think that smaller weight classes, bigger opportunities in different venues across the world need to happen more. And just more programs that we're going to see in like the Olympics, that of course is an evolution that would make the most sense to me.